Okay, today we're going microscopic to explore what is, no joke, the single most important concept in all of biology, the cell. It's the fundamental building block of literally every living thing, from the tiniest bacterium all the way up to, well, you and me. So let's just dive right in. So, have you ever really stopped to think about it? I mean, what's the actual difference between a rock and a rose? What secret does a mouse have that a super advanced robot doesn't? What is that fundamental spark that we call life? It's a huge question, right? But biology, it turns out, has a surprisingly simple answer. And that's it. That's the secret. The one thing that absolutely all living organisms share is that they are made of this basic unit, the cell. Some living things are just one single cell, doing their own thing. And others, like us, are actually a massive, complex community of trillions of them working together. Now, this definition is so important. A cell isn't just a part of something living. It's the smallest possible thing that can be considered truly alive all by itself. See, anything less than a complete cell, like just a nucleus or a strand of DNA floating around, it just can't live on its own. It needs the whole package. Figuring this all out was not easy. It took centuries of people peering through microscopes and some really brilliant minds piecing together clues to form one of the most important theories in all of science. Let's take a look at how they cracked the code of life itself. What's so cool here is how fast these ideas clicked into place. So in 1838, you've got Matthias Schleiden, who looks at tons of plants and has this aha moment. They're all made of cells. Then just 1 year later, Theodor Schwann realizes, wait a second, the same thing is true for animals. But the puzzle wasn't quite finished until 1855, when Rudolf Virchow added the final game-changing piece. New cells can only come from cells that already exist. Now, this was a huge deal because it completely debunked the old idea of spontaneous generation and set biology on a whole new track. And that all brings us to the cell theory as we know it today. And you know what? It's beautifully simple, with just two main rules. Rule 1, if it's alive, it's made of cells, period. Rule 2, you can't just whip up a cell from scratch. Every single cell on this planet is a direct descendant of a previous cell, in an unbroken chain going back billions of years. Okay, so all life is made of cells. Got it. But turns out not all cells are created equal. You can kind of think of it like life on Earth uses two fundamentally different blueprints for building things. A really simple, stripped-down model, and a much more complex one with all the bells and whistles. And this slide really lays out the difference. On one side, you have prokaryotic cells, like bacteria. They're the simple design. Their genetic material, their DNA, just kind of floats around inside. But then you have eukaryotic cells. That's us, plants, animals, fungi, and they are way more organized. They've got a true nucleus, like a safe, to house their DNA, and they're filled with all these other little membrane-bound compartments called organelles, which are basically tiny organs, each with its own specific job to do. And even within that complex eukaryotic blueprint, you get some key variations. Let's look at the two you probably know best. Plant cells have this rigid outer cell wall that gives them structure, which is why a plant can stand up straight. They also have chloroplasts. Those are the tiny green solar panels that do photosynthesis, turning sunlight into food. And they have a huge central vacuole, which is like a big water tank that keeps the cell firm. Animal cells, on the other hand, are more flexible because they don't have that wall, and they have these special things called centrioles that are super important when it's time for the cell to divide. You know, to really wrap your head around how a complex cell works, the absolute best way is to think of it like a bustling microscopic city. Every single part, every organelle, has a vital job to do to keep the whole city humming along. Right in the center of it all, you have the nucleus. This is City Hall, the main command center. It holds the city's master blueprints, the DNA. And from inside, it sends out all the orders for everything the cell needs to do, whether that's growing, making repairs, or reproducing. Of course, no city can run without power, and that's where the mitochondria come in. These are the power plants. These amazing little organelles take nutrients and convert them into ATP, which is basically the energy currency of the cell. This chemical fuel runs every single activity, which is why you always hear them called the powerhouses of the cell. Every city needs borders, right? And for the cell, that's the cell membrane. It's like a super smart border control. It's not a solid wall. It's a flexible barrier that is incredibly picky about what it lets in, like food and supplies, and what it kicks out, like waste. It's all about protecting the city's internal environment. So, City Hall is sending out instructions, but who's actually building everything? That would be the ribosomes. These are the tiny little factories all over the cell. They read the instructions sent from the DNA and start assembling proteins, which are the workers, the tools, and the building materials for the entire city. And finally, once you've made all this stuff, you have to process it and ship it out. That's the job of the endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus. Think of them as a massive production line and postal service all rolled into one. They modify, sort, and package everything up and then ship it to wherever it needs to go, either inside or outside the cell. All right, let's zoom back out for a second. We've been looking at a single microscopic city, but what happens when you get trillions of them together, all working in perfect harmony? Well, you get you. So let's bring this full circle. We started by asking what separates the living from the non-living. And the answer is this complex, self-sustaining, incredibly organized little city. This is the fundamental unit of life. And just to give you a sense of scale, which is almost impossible to really picture, a single human red blood cell is only about 7 micrometers across. To put that in perspective, you could line up almost 400 of them across the tiny head of a pin. And you are made of trillions of things that small. It's just mind-blowing. So what's the bottom line here? What do you absolutely need to remember? First, the cell is the basic unit of all life. Nothing simpler can be called alive. Second, life uses 2 main blueprints, the simple prokaryotes and the complex eukaryotes. Third, that complex cell works just like a miniature city with specialized parts for every single job. And finally, the incredible coordinated activity of trillions of these tiny cities is what makes you, well, you. And that leaves us with one last, kind of wild thought to chew on. If you aren't really a single being, but more like a giant, highly organized colony of trillions of individual living cells all working together, what does that really mean for the nature of life itself, and what it even means to be an individual? Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?